Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
Dad. The raw, frantic cry echoed off the rusted corrugated metal before I could even push the heavy door fully open. For a terrifying beat, my heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I stood paralyzed on the final rung of a greasy iron ladder inside a decaying textile mill on the outskirts of Atlanta, staring into a damp storage cell illuminated by a flickering fluorescent tube. A young man sat on a low wooden bench against the dripping wall. Skeletal, pale, visibly shaken, yet still undeniably my greatest pride. My son, Leo. The boy I had spent 7 agonizing months hunting for across 3 states. The boy the sheriff's department had labeled a runaway. The boy I had almost surrendered to grieving for, simply because the relentless ache of holding on to hope was eating me alive. Dad, he gasped again, his voice cracking. Then he broke down, burying his face in his hands. I sprinted across the concrete. The next few moments remain a total blur. I remember slamming my arms around him, pulling him in so hard I could feel every ridge of his spine beneath a dirt-caked denim jacket. I remember his entire body shuddering with dry sobs. Mostly, I remember a single, furious question hammering against my skull. How? How was he trapped here? And why? 24 hours earlier, I had no inkling that my reality was about to burn to the ground. My name is Marcus Vance. I'm a 51-year-old senior structural engineer based in Savannah, Georgia. For 22 years, I was married to Elena Vance. Or rather, I was married to the woman I foolishly believed she was. Wednesday had started with mundane predictability. I arrived at Vance and Sterling Engineering around 7:15 a.m. I've been leading project management there for nearly 15 years. The floor-wide plotter machine was jamming again. One of our field surveyors called in sick. Mr. Sterling brought in fresh peach cobbler from his wife's bakery, the kind of warm, small-town gesture people in coastal Georgia take for granted. On the surface, everything seemed standard. But standard was a bitter concept ever since Leo went missing. 7 months prior, my 18-year-old son left his high school track practice and simply vanished. State troopers investigated. Search parties combed the marshes. Local volunteer squads organized weekend grids. Elena and I practically lived out of our truck searching. At first. Then, a subtle shift occurred. Not in my determination, but in Elena's. Around month 3, Elena began dropping strange, casual remarks. Maybe he just felt smothered. You know how volatile 18-year-olds get. He'll make contact when he's ready to grow up. Every single time she uttered those words, a cold knot twisted in my stomach. Leo wasn't reckless like that. Sure, he had his moments, but he adored his family. He left notes on the whiteboard when he went for a run. He never missed family dinners without texting. Running away without a trace made 0 sense. Yet months dragged on. No leads. No financial activity. No sightings. Silence. By Wednesday evening, I was operating on sheer exhaustion. I pulled into our driveway around 6:30 p.m. Elena was already in the bedroom, adjusting her blazer in front of the mirror. Unexpected crisis with a commercial client, she stated smoothly, fastening an expensive silver watch. You just walked through the door, I replied, leaning against the frame. I know, she grabbed her briefcase and keys. A structural compliance issue at one of our high-value accounts up near Atlanta. I have to oversee it personally. I watched her walk toward the garage. A deep, instinctual alarm went off inside me. It wasn't unusual for her to travel late. She ran a high-profile commercial real estate appraisal firm covering northern Georgia. Late site visits happened. But her voice lacked its usual weight. It sounded rehearsed. Crisp. Fast, detached. She kissed my cheek politely. Don't wait up, Marcus. Then she drove off. I stood in the quiet hallway for 10 minutes, listening to the house settle. The silence was suffocating. At 8 p.m., I finally grabbed my jacket. I didn't have a concrete plan, just an unbearable restlessness that made staying home impossible. Her firm's regional branch was only 15 minutes away in downtown Savannah. Vance Appraisal Group occupied a sleek glass suite in an office park. When I pulled up, the lot was deserted. No company cars. No sign of Elena's sedan. I checked my phone, zero notifications. Using my spare key, I unlocked the glass entrance. The reception area was pitch black. I flicked on the overheads. Elena. Silence. I walked through the corridors. Empty cubicles. Empty executive suites. Empty break room. Frustration started boiling over. If she wasn't at the branch, where had she gone? I sat down at her grand mahogany desk, intending to leave a note. That's when I noticed her secondary desktop monitor. The machine wasn't in sleep mode, it was actively running a secure network feed. Multiple live security camera streams filled the grid. Most displayed mundane views: vacant corridors, parking garages, dimly lit loading docks. Standard surveillance. I was about to walk away when movement on the lower left feed caught my attention. A young man was walking slowly down a stark, windowless hallway. At first, I glanced away, assuming it was a night security guard. Then I looked back. My stomach plummeted. The figure paused, turning toward a ceiling-mounted lens. I nearly dropped my phone. Leo. I pressed my face inches from the glass screen. No, my voice rasped in the quiet office. It defied logic, yet there was no mistaking it. The unmistakable sharp jawline. The slight slouch in his stance. The distinct faint scar right above his left cheekbone from an old youth soccer tournament injury. My missing son. Alive. I stared at the monitor in absolute horror and disbelief. The timestamp running across the bottom confirmed it was a live, real-time transmission. Not a recording. Live. My hands shook uncontrollably as I scrambled to read the metadata embedded at the bottom of the feed. Site ID: North Mill Annex Structure 08. Fulton Industrial District. An address flickered next to it, an abandoned district nearly 4 hours north toward Atlanta. My immediate instinct was to dial 911 right then and there. My second instinct, fiercer and far more primal, overrode it. Move now. Get to him. I bolted out of the office and sprinted to my truck. The drive up the interstate was an agonizing blur. Every traffic light felt like an insult. Every slow truck in front of me felt like a personal enemy. All I could picture was that camera feed cutting to black before I arrived. By the time I reached the Fulton district, rain had begun to slick the pavement. The old mill stood isolated at the end of an unlit, heavily rutted road. Jagged windows, crumbling brickwork, rusted machinery exposed to the elements, the exact kind of place forgotten by time and civilization. I killed my headlights, stepped into the damp air, and forced my legs forward. My heart pounded so violently I could hear the rhythm pounding in my ears. The side service entrance was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with dirt and moisture. I followed a faint, low hum of machinery deeper into the floor layout until I spotted an iron access ladder leading straight down. At the bottom was a reinforced steel door. My trembling hand gripped the handle and pulled. That was when the scream cut through the darkness, and I lost all capacity for caution. I forgot the risk. I forgot Elena's lies. I forgot every law of self-preservation. All that mattered was that my son was breathing 10 feet in front of me. I sprinted across the damp floor, almost tripping over a rusted iron pipe. Leo pushed himself off the bench and collapsed against my chest, as if his legs had given out entirely. I squeezed him hard, probably too hard, but after 7 straight months of holding his old sports jerseys, smelling his empty room, and staring at his picture on my phone in empty parking lots, I needed the undeniable physical proof that he was real. "Kiddo," I whispered into his hair, tears blurring my vision. "Oh God, Leo." He just kept repeating, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." That broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Sorry. My teenage son had been held captive in a dark pit for over half a year, and somehow he felt he owed me an apology. I pulled back, holding his face firmly between my hands. "Look at me. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing." His eyes darted nervously toward the open door. "We have to leave. Now." Reality came rushing back. I took in the surrounding space: a cold, concrete box containing a single cot, a folding table stacked with military ration bars and bottled water, and a battery-powered lantern. Whoever kept him here wasn't trying to torture him to death. They were holding him like an inconvenient piece of evidence. "Can you make it up the ladder?" I asked softly. He nodded, but as soon as he shifted his weight, he swayed violently. I grabbed his arm, wrapping it over my shoulder. "I've got you. Lean on me." As we reached the top of the metal ladder, he hesitated, his body going rigid. "Dad, what if Mom comes back?" An icy spike drove straight through my chest. "What does your mother have to do with this?" He didn't answer. "Not yet." I managed to guide him into the passenger seat of my truck and slammed the central locks. My hands were trembling so severely I dropped the ignition key twice before starting the engine. I reached for my phone to dial emergency services, but Leo grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't call them." "Not yet." "Leo, you were locked in an underground vault. Please," his voice cracked with raw desperation. "Not until you hear what happened." I looked at his face in the soft green glow of the dashboard lights. He looked infinitely older, not in years, but in trauma. So, I put the truck in drive and pulled away. But I didn't head home. Instinct told me our house was no longer safe. Instead, I drove west toward Alabama, heading for the farm owned by my older brother, Arthur. Arthur was a 58-year-old retired Army mechanic who lived on an isolated plot of land with a long gravel driveway and 2 notoriously aggressive guard dogs. He was practical, hypervigilant, and kept emergency gear in every corner of his homestead. When Arthur opened his front door and saw Leo standing under the porch light, he went deathly silent. "Good Lord," Arthur breathed out. Leo collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table. Arthur didn't ask a single probing question right away. He simply shut the heavy wooden door, threw a wool blanket over Leo's shoulders, and poured 3 mugs of black coffee. The wall clock read 11:14 p.m. Arthur sat down across from my son, his tone remarkably gentle for a man of his size. "Son, who did this to you?" Leo looked at me, then stared down at his trembling hands. "Mom didn't plan it," he whispered. A fleeting, absurd spark of relief flashed through me. But then Leo added, "But she managed it." My coffee mug clattered against the table, spilling dark liquid across the wood. "What do you mean, managed it?" Leo swallowed hard, his throat working tightly. "It started right before I vanished. I came back early from track practice because I left my laptop in my locker. When I walked into the house, Mom was in her home office with Harrison Vance and that broker from Atlanta." "Harrison?" I asked, confused. Harrison was my cousin and Elena's primary business partner, a slick, fast-talking developer with custom suits and a loud, phony laugh. Leo nodded slowly. They were talking about falsified environmental surveys, inflated commercial land values, and pension funds. Mom was telling them that the state regulators were starting to cross-check county deeds, and Harrison told her to stay cool because the investors are too old to understand digital records anyway. Arthur grunted, folding his massive arms. "I'd like 10 minutes alone in a dark room with that snake." I recorded part of what they were saying, Leo confessed softly. "You recorded them?" I asked, leaning in. "On my phone," Leo said. "I thought if I brought it to you, you'd know how to handle it. But Mom caught me standing in the hallway." I pressed my palms against my eyes as a wave of nausea hit me. Leo's voice sounded so small. "She told me I was misinterpreting things. That high-level real estate deals sound scary when you don't understand finance. But that night, she took my phone. She told me you dropped it in the river while jogging," I remembered bitterly. Every single subtle lie was falling into place. Leo continued. The next afternoon, Harrison was waiting outside the school field. He said Mom had been in a pileup on the highway and that he was taking me to the hospital. I was so panicked I just jumped into his car. "They used your love for your mother against you," Arthur said quietly, placing a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder. "That's pure poison." "They moved me 3 times," Leo whispered, wiping his face on the sleeve of the blanket. Always inside abandoned properties Mom's firm was appraising. Harrison kept saying they just needed a few weeks to finalize an offshore transfer. Then weeks turned into months. "And your mother?" My voice was deadly flat. Leo looked at me with unbearable sorrow. "She came to the mill twice." I stood up so fast my chair flipped backward, clattering against the linoleum. I walked over to Arthur's kitchen sink, gripping the edge of the basin until my knuckles turned white. My reflection in the dark glass showed a man completely hollowed out. Elena came twice. She saw our son in a cage. And she walked away. I had slept beside her for over 2 decades. I had cooked her meals, bought her flowers, and sat beside her in church while she wept openly in front of the congregation, praying for our missing boy. Behind me, Leo whispered, she wept the first time she saw me. She said she was trying to find a way out that wouldn't put us all in prison. She told me if I just stayed quiet, no one would get hurt. And the second time? I asked without turning around. She told me you were starting to move on, Leo said, his voice trembling. She said you were finally accepting that I had run away. No, I hissed, turning back around. No, I never believed that for a single second. The room fell dead silent, save for the hum of Arthur's ancient refrigerator. Suddenly, my phone buzzed violently on the table. Elena. Her name flashed across the screen in bold letters. None of us moved. It rang until it hit voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By midnight, she had dialed 31 times. She's either panicking or realizing her trap sprung, Arthur muttered. Then a voicemail notification popped up. I tapped the speaker button, setting the phone on the table between us. Elena's voice filled the kitchen, sharp, breathless, entirely stripped of its usual smooth composure. Marcus, I know you checked the office network. Listen to me very carefully. If you are with Leo, do not contact law enforcement. You have no idea what kind of people are involved in this. You will destroy everything. The message clicked off. Arthur looked at me. Leo stared at the screen as if it were a venomous snake. That was the moment I realized the situation was far worse than a simple family betrayal. Elena wasn't just hiding a fraud scheme, she was terrified of the people backing it. And if she was terrified, my son and I were walking through a minefield. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Exhaustion had transcended physical fatigue, settling into a cold, focused anger. Leo finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. on Arthur's sofa, wrapped in an old family quilt. Arthur kept watch in his armchair by the front window with a shotgun resting across his lap. I sat at the kitchen table, playing her message over and over in my head. You have no idea what kind of people are involved. At dawn, I poured fresh coffee. For the first time since finding my son, I stopped thinking like a distraught father and started thinking like an engineer analyzing a structural collapse. Elena hadn't hidden Leo to protect her marriage or her reputation. She was covering up a massive criminal operation. The real question was, how deep did it go? Around 7:30 a.m., Leo woke up. He looked haggard, but the terror in his eyes had settled into something quieter. Arthur fried up bacon and eggs, though none of us ate much. I sat across from Leo. Kiddo, I need to know every detail you remember. Leo reached into the inner pocket of his worn denim jacket and pulled out a tiny, silver microSD card. My breath hitched. What is that? The audio file, Leo said softly. Mom found my phone, but she didn't check the memory slot. I hid this inside the lining of my running shoes before Harrison took me. We inserted the memory card into Arthur's laptop. The audio quality was rough, stifled by the shoe lining and muffled by ambient noise, but after turning the volume all the way up, Elena's voice was unmistakable. Then Harrison's. Then a third, deeper voice I didn't recognize. What I heard turned my blood cold. They weren't just discussing bad real estate deals. They were detailing a systemic scheme involving wire fraud, forged land titles, ghost development projects, and siphon accounts set up under offshore shell entities. Half these municipal retirees don't even check their quarterly statements, the unknown man laughed coldly. They just look at the header logo and assume their pensions are safe. They won't notice a damn thing until the fund goes bust, Harrison added casually. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a bad business venture, it was a criminal syndicate preying on elderly taxpayers and community trust. By noon, I knew what had to be done. We needed hard facts, not just suspicion. Leo recalled one name that appeared repeatedly in their conversations, Colonel Richard Vance, a distant uncle of mine, an 80-year-old decorated military veteran who lived near Macon. Elena had recently handled a series of high-value land appraisals for his Veterans Foundation. I called Richard's house, keeping my tone calm, and asked to meet. 2 hours later, Arthur drove us to a quiet diner outside Macon while Leo stayed safe at Arthur's farm. Richard was sitting in a booth at the back, nursing a cup of black tea. A man of quiet dignity, his hands trembled slightly as he greeted me. When I explained that Leo had been found and delicately hinted at financial irregularities, the color completely drained from his face. "Marcus," Richard's voice rasped. "2 years ago, Elena convinced our Veterans Lodge to consolidate our land holdings and trust fund through her firm's commercial brokerage." My jaw tightened. "How many people were involved, Uncle Richard?" He swallowed hard, looking broken. "Over 200 members. Widows, wounded vets, retired teachers. Marcus, we put nearly $3 million into those trusts." I felt ill. Decades of service, hard work, and sacrifice stolen by people who smiled at Sunday services and sponsored local youth sports teams. At that moment, Richard's wife, Clara, walked into the diner carrying 2 faded, metal biscuit tins. She set them firmly on the table. "Clara, please," Richard sighed softly. "Don't Clara please me, Richard," she said sharply. "I keep every receipt. I kept every statement, every tax form, every handwritten note Elena ever sent us." She opened the first tin. It was packed tight with meticulously organized financial records. Those biscuit tins turned out to be pure gold: names, transaction dates, bank routing numbers, forged valuation certificates, an undeniable trail of paper evidence. Over the next 3 days, I quietly met with other victims, former factory workers, retired civil servants, widows. Every single story chipped away another piece of my former life. I couldn't stop asking myself the same harrowing question: how do you live beside someone for 22 years and never truly know who they are? On Friday evening, as Leo and I sat on Arthur's back porch watching the sunset, Leo looked up at me with a sudden realization. "Dad, there's one more thing." My attention snapped to him. "What is it, son?" "The day Harrison took me," Leo whispered, "I didn't just back up the audio file to that micro SD card. I synced my phone's encrypted cloud drive right before Mom took it. There's a second recording." My pulse spiked. "A second recording?" "It's stored in a secure folder on an old server host I set up for my high school computer club," Leo said, his eyes flashing with newfound resolve. "And I know the exact IP address." 10 minutes later, we pulled up the server logs on Arthur's computer. The second file was pristine. The audio was crystal clear, capturing nearly 20 minutes of a strategic meeting inside Elena's office. And what we heard made the first recording look like child's play. Elena's voice was the dominant force. She wasn't being manipulated, she was directing the entire structure. She discussed moving assets through offshore accounts, fabricating audit trails, and silencing whistleblowers. Then came the chilling sentence that caused all 3 of us to freeze. "If Leo ever understands what these deeds actually mean and talks, the entire operation collapses." The room went dead silent. There was no ambiguity, no gray area. My wife knew precisely what she was sacrificing. Arthur slowly folded his arms, looking at the screen. "Well," he muttered, "she's an absolute idiot." I let out a harsh, breathless laugh. It wasn't funny, but Arthur's blunt honesty cut right through the suffocating horror. Elena was dangerous, but she was foolish enough to leave a digital trail. That afternoon, I bypassed the local authorities and went directly to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit in Atlanta. Special Agent Sarah Vance, no relation, met us in a quiet conference room. She reviewed the cloud drive logs, examined Clara's biscuit tins of receipts, and spent hours listening to Leo's testimony. When the interview concluded, Agent Vance leaned back and rubbed her temples. "This is a massive case, Mr. Vance." "So you can arrest her?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "We can prove severe financial fraud," Agent Vance explained carefully. "What we need before making arrests is hard evidence of who is managing the direct extortion and physical containment. We need her on record admitting to the operational decisions." She looked straight at me. "We need you to talk to her while wearing a wire. We need her comfortable enough to open her mouth." My stomach turned. "No, absolutely not." "I understand your hesitation," Agent Vance said gently. But if we move now without a direct confession, corporate lawyers will push the blame onto lower-level subordinates and shell companies. She could walk. For 2 agonizing days, I refused. The thought of sitting across from Elena after what she had done to Leo made me physically sick. Then Uncle Richard called to tell me another retired veteran had just lost his life savings. The next morning, Leo quietly looked at me and said, "Dad, if she isn't stopped, she'll just do this to another family." That was the turning point. 3 days later, I arranged to meet Elena at a secluded diner near Augusta, a neutral, public space. When she walked through the doors, she looked ragged, dark circles beneath her eyes, wrinkled jacket, her usual pristine appearance completely shattered. She sat down, her hands trembling, and immediately broke into quiet tears. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. You have to believe me." I stared at her, feeling entirely detached. She wasn't crying out of remorse for Leo. She was weeping for her own collapsing world. "Where have you been, Elena?" I asked calmly, the wire hidden under my heavy jacket recording every frequency. "I was trying to protect us," she hissed in a hushed whisper. "Harrison got us involved with dangerous private equity lenders. I had to keep Leo out of sight until the debts were cleared." For the next 2 hours, guided by Agent Vance's instructions over an earpiece, I gently nudged her. I let her believe I was open to reconciliation, that I was overwhelmed and wanted to figure out a way through it together. Bit by bit, believing she was reclaiming control, Elena began to talk. She admitted to staging the land transfers, approving the storage sites, and instructing Harrison to keep Leo hidden. The trap was fully set. The following evening, the Savannah Commercial Real Estate Association was holding its annual charity gala at a prestigious country club. Over 300 high-profile guests, civic leaders, and investors were in attendance. It was Elena's crowning social event of the year, the place where she felt most invincible. Agent Vance and her team agreed. This was the moment to execute the warrants. I arrived at the ballroom around 7 p.m., dressed in a black suit. The room was breathtaking: crystal chandeliers, polished parquet floors, live string quartet music. Elena was already near the main stage, sipping champagne and smiling at local politicians, masquerading as a pillar of the community. When she saw me walk in, relief washed over her face. She rushed over, gripping my arm. "You came," she whispered. "I said I would," I replied evenly. At 8:15 p.m., Elena stepped up to the podium to deliver her keynote address on community investment. She spoke passionately about trust, integrity, and building a secure future for local families. I watched the audience nod in approval, entirely enchanted by her polished charm. "We must always safeguard our community," Elena proclaimed into the microphone. At that exact second, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. The music abruptly cut out. Heads turned toward the entrance as a sudden, heavy silence fell over the ballroom. Leo walked calmly through the open doors, dressed in a sharp dark suit, standing tall and steady beside Arthur. He looked healthy, resolute, and completely transformed from the terrified boy in the underground mill. Gasps echoed through the room. A prominent city council member dropped his glass, sending shattered crystal and red wine cascading across the polished floor. People instantly recognized Leo from the missing person flyers that had covered the city for months. Elena's face drained of color so fast she looked like a phantom standing at the podium. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Behind Leo, Special Agent Sarah Vance stepped into the ballroom, flanked by 4 plainclothes state investigators and uniformed officers. The entire atmosphere shifted from a celebration of high society to an active federal crime scene. Agent Vance walked down the main aisle toward the stage, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. "Elena Vance," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the silent hall. "What is the meaning of this?" Harrison blustered, stepping out from a front table, his voice high and defensive. "This is a private charitable function." Agent Vance didn't even look at him. She motioned to 2 officers, who immediately moved in and pinned Harrison's arms behind his back. Harrison's composure completely disintegrated. "It wasn't me," he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger directly at Elena. "She set up the offshore accounts. She managed the property access. I was just following her instructions. A bitter, almost absurd laugh broke out from a table of retired military veterans near the back. After years of posturing as a powerful developer, Harrison had folded in less than 10 seconds. Agent Vance stepped up to the stage microphone, ensuring her words were broadcast through every speaker in the room. Elena Vance, you are under arrest for multi-million-dollar wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, conspiracy, and the unlawful confinement of a material witness. Whispers erupted into an uproar. Dozens of prominent investors, including Uncle Richard and Clara, stood up to watch as handcuffs were clicked around Elena's wrists. As the officers escorted her down the stage, she passed within inches of where I stood. She stopped, staring at me with a mixture of shock and quiet fury. "You ruined everything, Marcus," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. I looked her dead in the eye, feeling no anger, no regret, only absolute clarity. "No, Elena," I said softly. "You did." The months that followed were far from easy. Rebuilding a shattered life takes time. There were grand jury testimonies, news vans parked at the end of the driveway, mountain-high legal documents, and endless hours of therapy. Yet, step by step, light returned. Through asset seizures, federal forfeitures, and forensic accounting, the state managed to recover nearly 60% of the stolen pension funds. Uncle Richard and Clara kept their home, and several elderly widows received their life savings back. Leo completed his high school equivalency exams and enrolled in a top university engineering program the following autumn. Watching him pack his bags for his dorm room, hearing him laugh freely again without fear lingering in his eyes, was worth every single battle. As for me, I sold the big house in Savannah and bought a quiet timber cottage near Arthur's farm. Nothing extravagant, just a simple place with a front porch, a workshop, and peace of mind. If this long nightmare taught me anything, it's that the truth has a way of cutting through even the most elaborate lies. And trust should never require you to stay silent when your gut tells you something is wrong.